Tonight in Greater Boston, as the eyes of the world are focused on Russia and Ukraine, and the U.S. tries to derail Putin with ever-increasing economic sanctions, many have all but forgotten about another country where the U.S. has been relying on sanctions in lieu of troops, Afghanistan, where economic collapse has spiraled into a full-blown humanitarian crisis since the U.S. withdrawal. Then later, a tribute to the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. It's coming to Boston. The artists behind it, including Valerie Simpson of the legendary Ashford and Simpson, join me. Plus, an update on a case we've been following, that of Charles Bogues, who pled guilty to the 1993 murder of Louis D. Brown, but says prosecutors lied to get him to do it. Ukraine has been calling up its military reservists as the violence with Russian soldiers in the east is worsening. And while Joe Biden has already called Russia's actions an invasion, he's hoping inflicting financial pain on Putin might keep him from taking things even further.
I'm going to begin to impose sanctions in response far beyond the steps we and our allies and partners implemented in 2014. And if Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared to go further as with sanctions.
Of course, this isn't the first time Biden has relied on sanctions to try to keep the peace abroad. After he pulled U.S. troops out of Afghanistan last year, he opted for economic consequences against the Taliban there too, cutting off foreign aid, which accounts for nearly a third of the nation's economy and the vast majority of its government spending. Biden also froze more than $7 billion of the Afghan government's foreign reserves and now plans to return only half to the country for humanitarian support, diverting the other half to families of 9/11 victims who sued the Taliban. And this has all dealt a powerful blow to Afghanistan's economy, which former UK Foreign Secretary David Miliband said at a U.S. Senate hearing earlier this month is rapidly deteriorating.
6 months ago, Afghanistan was a poor country. However, today, Afghanistan is a starving country.
Miliband urged Biden to make an urgent change in his policy, as have others. Joined now by Washington Post foreign affairs columnist David Ignatius. David, it's great for you to be here. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Do you share Miliband's assessment of the situation in Afghanistan?
I do think from everything that I hear, including from David Miliband, that the situation is verging on humanitarian catastrophe. The Taliban is not making it easy for the world to help Afghanistan, but I think there have got to be ways to get aid to the country without the Taliban's hands on it, so that the level of starvation, suffering, just the human cost through this winter is reduced as much as possible.
Yeah, I've read most about starvation issues. What I haven't read as much about lately is the education of young girls. We've frequently had on the show a local woman who opened a school for girls several years ago. But it seems the problem is this, not just the Taliban's attitude about educating women, young girls, but also the ability to pay teachers. Has any of that been addressed or no?
It's being addressed, but inadequately. The Biden administration, State Department Special Coordinator for Afghanistan, Tom West, is trying to free up money that can be used to pay Afghan civil servants. The largest percentage of the civil service is teachers, and they're trying to condition this on reopening schools to allow girls and young women to be educated around the country. And they also want to find ways to monitor that. The Taliban has made not promises, but indications that it's prepared to open schools to girls, but there's got to be some way to verify that. So people see it as an important issue. They want to get the money to the teachers to be able to reopen the schools. There simply isn't yet an adequate channel to talk with the Taliban and get what we would think of as reliable, binding commitments to do these things.
Well, you know, I mentioned in the introduction to you the $7 billion of frozen assets. First half or a half going to the families of victims who are suing the Taliban, the other half theoretically the nation. Is the former defensible and is the latter doable? You seem to be suggesting there is no conduit for that.
There are conduits. There are ways that people have been crafting. There are financial institutions operating mainly in England that are providing money to be used by NGOs, by others who can pay aid workers In some cases, we can get money to teachers. So there's a real effort to get money into the country, even though sanctions still are in place. I think we need to have a clearer picture. It's one problem with there being so many fewer journalists there. We need to have a clearer picture of what this suffering looks like, because that's what's going to motivate people to take action.
You know, speaking of suffering, one of the saddest parts of many sad moments about the evacuation was leaving so many people who had risked their lives, Afghans who had risked their lives to work with us towards a goal that was never achieved. Are we doing any better on that front, or are they essentially abandoned where they were?
They're largely abandoned. It's my understanding that the number of flights out, the flow out of people is very limited. Obviously, the Taliban doesn't want the educated people who can keep the country running to all flee, so they're making it difficult for people to get out. I think it's just a terrible situation. What I'd say, Jim, is having spent 20 years struggling to defeat the Taliban, but we thought create a free and modern Afghanistan. The idea of just abandoning it now to its fate, I think strikes a lot of people as wrong. It certainly strikes me as wrong. So I just hope people will be as creative as they can in finding ways to get money to people who are suffering and need it.
But to be creative, you have to pay attention. And one of the things I fear, and I wonder if you do, is that not just the American people, but our government has a hard time walking and chewing gum at the same time. And with all eyes on Ukraine, are there enough eyes on Afghanistan?
So all eyes at the top level, at the National Security Council, are on Ukraine, and you can't really fault that.
Of course.
The State Department's coordinator for Afghanistan, Tom West, is working as hard. I've talked with him. He is meeting with international relief officials, the head of the International Committee for the Red Cross. Peter Moore met with him recently, spoke to me after he left West's office, and said that he thought the U.S. was committed to trying to get things done, trying to make changes in our Treasury sanctions policy to make it easier for money to flow to humanitarian projects, despite the Taliban's refusal to make an inclusive government that would allow us to do this in a more straightforward way. So I think there's effort, attention at the mid-level, at the very top level. No, people are preoccupied.
You know, you wrote several months ago that Biden's greatest foreign policy accomplishment thus far had been restoring our global alliances, and you made a pointed exception, the lack of consultation with our allies around Afghanistan. I assume you believe that that experience informs the collaborative, very public position that Biden has taken in this whole Ukraine thing. Do you not?
I do. I just was in Munich last weekend for the Munich Security Conference, and it was a almost festival of NATO unity. I haven't seen the Europeans and Americans singing from the same songbook, if you will, in that same way for many years. And I think it's attributable in large part to the Biden administration's strenuous efforts to keep our European allies informed from the very first intelligence warnings that we had that something new was happening in Ukraine in October. But when that intelligence came through, the first thing that the Biden administration did was send CIA Director Bill Burns to Moscow to talk to the Russians to say, hey, we see what you're doing, knock it off. And that the second thing they did was to go brief the European allies. They sent the Director of National Intelligence, Irene Haynes. She made this information available to an extent that we often don't. We often don't share that intelligence. And I think that's made a difference. And it's striking to me on the eve of who knows what the next hours and days will bring. Could be a nightmare. But I think that the U.S. and its European allies are united. The fact that the Germans, in a sense, have taken the toughest move yet, the Germans we often criticize for not being tough enough against Russia, they have stopped the Nord Stream pipeline. That's a big deal for Russia.
It's a huge deal. You know, speaking of things I worry about, the other thing I worry about is that the legacy of America First has become America only. And while Joe Biden has gone out of his way, at least in the last 24 hours, to be pretty transparent with the American people, not only about what he thinks Russia is doing, but about what the consequences of this will be for Americans. I don't know if you saw the Associated Press poll that came out, and we'll put it up for a second. How big of a role, it's not the most precise question, should the United States have in the situation between Russia and Ukraine? 2-to-1 minor role over major role. And by the way, it's not on the screen, but stunningly to me, the breakdown among parties was virtually the same, a little bit more among Republicans, but not much less about Democrats. That's bad news for a president trying to rally the folks back home, isn't it?
It is bad news. Those are scary numbers. If twice as many people think that we should play only a modest role in what will be the biggest international military crisis in Europe since 1945, something's just out of whack in America. That's not good for our image, but more to the point, it's not good for our interests. The idea that we can just ignore a big shooting war in Europe and it doesn't affect us is, that just, I'm sorry, folks, but wait until you see your gasoline pump in a couple of weeks. So it does affect us. We do need to care. I think Biden just needs to communicate that more effectively to the country. I think it's been good recently that he's said to people, this affects you. You need to understand you have a stake in this. But people need to buy into that.
But it seems to me he's also, the difficulty he's having is not just with the American people. The difficulties he's having is with an outspoken former president who continues to cozy up to Putin. I'm sure you heard, here's a little bit of what Trump had to say yesterday on a radio show about what's going on.
I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right.
Lapdog eternal, it seems to be. How does a current president overcome that when 70 million people seem to buy what he is selling?
The honest answer is you just have to ignore it. It's so completely, to me, off the wall. There's no, I don't know what could Trump possibly be talking about in this endorsement. I wish that this problem was as simple as Trump and Trump's influence. It isn't. Those poll numbers tell you something that's quite independent of Donald Trump, which is that the American people, after 20 years of frustrating, unsuccessful wars, are sick of the kinds of foreign involvement that our elites tell them are necessary. And so I get it. That's why communicating to the country and saying that this really does matter. Here's why it matters. Here's why your future is at stake in what's happening in Ukraine, a country real far away, but it does matter. And unless that communication is done, I think people are just going to stick with, as you put it earlier, America first. Why should I care about this? So that question has to be answered straight up.
David, the last thing, ask you to play Nostradamus as best you can. I know it's really difficult in this situation. Is there an off-ramp for Putin here that allows him to save face, or are we just at the beginning of a long, deadly slog?
Jim, there was an off-ramp until yesterday when Putin blew it up. The off-ramp was the Minsk agreements, because there are two of them. And that was a way to resolve the crisis in the Donbass, these two breakaway enclaves in eastern Ukraine. Russia had agreed to it. The United States supports it. Our European allies have been negotiating with Ukraine. That was the exit ramp. And with Putin's declaration that these are now independent republics, the Minsk agreements essentially have been torn in shreds. So that's the clearest sign to me that Putin's going to keep going. I mean, the way he would get out of this has now disappeared. He's now demanding acceptance of his maximal demands, a promise that Ukraine never enter NATO or some version of that. He's not going to get that, and so I think this one's going to go on for a long time, and I fear it's going to get really, really violent, especially for the Ukrainian people who will be fighting it alone.
David, I really appreciate your time, and please be clear, Cambridge misses you, David Ignatius. Thanks for your...
it's my birthplace, hometown. Love to be back there.
Hope to see you soon. David, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. I don't like to use the word icon too often, but with 18 Grammy Awards, 44 nominations, 112 singles making the Billboard charts, and over 75 million records sold, icon isn't even enough to describe Aretha Franklin. And this Friday at the Berklee Performance Center, her work is being celebrated in a tribute to Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul.
Ain't nothing like the real. Ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. Whoa. Ain't nothing like the real thing.
That was Damien Sneed, bandleader, vocalist, and composer who toured with Franklin in the later years of her career. He'll be joined in Friday's tribute show by Valerie Simpson, the legendary songwriter and producer who, along with her late husband, Nicholas Ashford, wrote that song you just heard, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, plus hits like Ain't No Mountain High Enough, I'm Every Woman, You're All I Need to Get By, and I Don't Need No Doctor, which was first recorded by Ray Charles, has been covered dozens of times since, and which Simpson performed a few years back at Berklee's commencement. Valerie Simpson and Damien Sneed join me now. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Valerie, I want you to know I came to work in a horrible mood this morning, and I sat at my desk and watched you sing at the piano, I'm Every Woman. My whole day changed, so I want to thank you in advance.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So you
see what music can do?
No, see what you can do, I think, is the appropriate thing. So you both knew her, starting with you, Valerie Simpson. What effect did she have on you, professionally, personally, both?
I think probably because she was such a great pianist, and I love the piano, and a wonderful vocalist. That was the first thing that touched my heart. You know, we shared that in common. And then she happened to like Ashford and Simpson songs and recorded a lot of them.
Well, if that's the case, I have something in common with Aretha Franklin. You know, Damien, I can't even imagine. I tried to conceptualize what you did for those years playing for her. What was that like? What impact did that have on you?
I had a great impact, but I was nervous the entire time because Aretha missed nothing. She heard every chord, every note, every rest. Even when I played organ, she could tell when I was switching the Leslie from tremolo to off. I mean, she was just absolutely amazing, brilliant.
You know, Damien, staying with you for a second, when I was thinking about the two of you coming on tonight, and I'm saying you were in the presence of regularly every day for this period of time with Aretha Franklin, I was trying to think, have I ever been alone with somebody who was the best at what they did, if anyone ever lived? And I realized about 15 years ago, I had an hour-long interview with Bill Russell, and my radio co-host and I are in the same room with Russell, and I tried stepping back repeatedly, not literally throughout the interview, grappling with the reality of being with a person who did something better than anyone ever had. Did you have those moments when you were touring with her, Damien?
Most definitely. Like I said, every moment, watching her sing, watching her do Bridge Over Troubled Water, where she would come to the piano and I would play with her on organ. I mean, every night, each show was different. She came with new energy, new fire. And I've always felt that from Aretha Franklin, as I also feel every night with Valerie Simpson on stage. I feel the exact same way about her.
I love that. I can totally believe it. So, Valerie, you know, following up on what Damien said, there are a lot of great singers. Many feel there's Aretha and everybody else. What put her on a pedestal apart from everybody else who has done what she did?
I think I'd have to say the diversity. She did everything top shelf. She just couldn't help herself. I mean, it was a blues song, if it was a pop song, if it was a gospel song, she gave you the top echelon of that thing. And most people can, they have an area, but she covered the whole arena. And I love that about her.
Valerie, do you have a moment from your relationship that stays with you about Aretha Franklin?
Well, years ago, before I knew her well, she had done one of our songs. I invited her to my home, and she brought all her children, and she brought her brother, and she didn't talk, but she ate everything, and we had a wonderful time. I was just thrilled. I didn't think she was going to come, but she did, and so that's how our relationship began.
Can't imagine having Aretha Franklin over to my house.
For dinner.
For dinner. So, Damien, while you were not quaking at the organ every single minute, what's the one encounter, the one moment with Aretha Franklin that stays with you?
I think there was a party after our performance at the Santa Barbara Bowl where the band and singers were there, and she invited me to come sit at the table with her and two of her friends. And that moment was very special. I'll never forget that evening.
Valerie, you and your husband, for very young people here, were huge. I mean, just huge, just brilliant and huge in every kind of way. Having said that, when you, I read that in one of the earlier performances on this tour, you closed the show, I hope I'm not giving anything away, by singing the song that Rolling Stone said was the greatest song in the history of songs, Respect. How is covering a song like that? What's that like? What's that like?
Well, I have to set it up. I set the song up because she was looking into the future when she realized what women needed that they didn't have. And we didn't know we didn't have it. And she gave us a platform to stand and demand it because Otis Redding had made it a hit before her. He wrote it.
Of course.
But she put the thing on it that allowed us to go forward. And so I sing it proudly. And now it's a song just for everybody because we all need that.
You don't seem like the type who ever gets intimidated by anything. Is that intimidating or it's not?
No, it's comforting.
So, Damien, tell us about the show. We know that you two are a part of it. Tell us about what the rest of people will get Friday night.
There's a phenomenally talented, virtuosic group of singers and musicians who help us cover every possible style and genre of American music that Aretha Franklin found herself expressing, from classical to gospel to blues to jazz to R&B. It's all there, and it's a great team. It's a great group of people. I think there's music in the repertoire that everyone will enjoy.
And I assume some things, as hard as it is to believe, that some people may not be that familiar with part of her catalog, no?
Yeah, because her catalog is so massive. It's so vast. I'm still learning things more and more every day.
Well, I'm hoping to be there. Damien, it's a pleasure to meet you. And Valerie Simpson, I have been a fan forever. And it's a thrill to meet you. Thank you both. Good luck on Friday. And I hope everybody shows up for a terrific evening. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Be well. A tribute to Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, will be at the Berklee Performance Center on Friday, February 25th. Tickets are available at DamienSneed.com. Before we go, we want to share an update on a case that we've been following here in Greater Boston, that of Charles Bogues. He pled guilty to the 1993 murder of 15-year-old Louis D. Brown, caught in the crossfire of a gang shootout. But for years, Bogues has been trying to reverse that guilty plea, accusing Boston prosecutors, even his own lawyer, of talking him into taking responsibility for the shooting, as he told us just a few weeks ago.
They knew when I pled guilty that I wasn't the person who killed Louis Brown. There was actually about 3 different .45s that was fired that day from different individuals. And the shell casing that they said that they attributed to my gun, they didn't match the bullet that they retrieved from Louis Brown. That was the first thing. Second thing was that they had eyewitnesses that actually saw the person who shot and killed Louis Brown, and the person didn't look like me at all. So those 2 factors, plus, when you look at the documents when the documents are dated, and as opposed to when they convened the grand jury, you can tell that they had all the evidence before they went to the grand jury and they lied about it.
Charles Bogues has long called for an investigation into his prosecution, a call Louis Brown's mother, Clementina Cherry, noted anti-violence crusader and founder of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, has echoed, saying to us in a statement earlier this month in part, "I am praying to my God that there can be a deep investigation into this case. I have so many questions and I have reached out to the new DA and I am looking forward to speaking with him in hopes that he will make this and cases like this a priority." And it appears he will. Interim Suffolk County DA Kevin Hayden joined Marjorie Egan and me on Boston Public Radio this past Friday and said this about Bogues' case.
We do have intention to look at it, and we are looking at it. We are looking at that case actively, and so I don't think I could say much more than that right now.
We hope he'll have more to say soon, and we'll continue to update this story if and when he does. That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay safe.
New dawn,
New vibe.
new duo. Join me, Paris Alston,
And me, Jeremy Siegel.
for GBH's Morning Edition
Your spot for local news and fresh insights.
to kick off your morning and inspire your day.
Weekdays from 5 to 10 on 89.7.
Wait, did I just commit a crime? Hey folks, I'm Edgar B. Harwick III from GBH's Curiosity Desk, where you ask questions and I find answers. Today's question comes courtesy of Betty Davis from Gloucester, Massachusetts, who wants to know, is it in fact a crime to remove these labels? Now you find these guys on pillows, mattresses, even a lot of winter coats, and the reason why is because you cannot see what is inside of those items. Now today, pillows, for example, are usually stuffed with feathers or cotton or some kind of synthetic material. But according to Maggie Terry, back in the day, they put some pretty gnarly stuff in the stuffing.
I mean, it used to be years ago, they'd throw anything they wanted to into the bedding. Newspapers, dirty rags.
Horsehair, used hospital or hotel mattresses, corn husks.
Sweepings off the floor, part of their lunches, droppings, I mean, anything.
For starters, that's disgusting, and furthermore, it's dangerous and unhealthy. So today, a lot of states require these labels that tell you what is inside of the item, and it is against the law to remove them. Sort of. Retailers and manufacturers can be fined if they remove the labels, but once you buy it or I buy it, if you read closely, most of these end with the line, "except by the consumer." So there you have it. Feel free to rip away. Don't forget to follow and tell us what you are curious about, because hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Harwick III. Stay curious out there.